So you're going to need your color theory book off to the side. You're going to open your cubism packet to the page where it has your analytic cubism design and transfer steps. And then we have Prismacolor Techniques below that. This part we'll discuss tomorrow, right before you start with your final draft. It's like some things to think about, some things to be aware of. Hold on, let me adjust this a little bit. I don't know how helpful that was. All right. So there are 4 techniques listed. On your final draft, we're gonna learn all 4 today, and on your final draft, you're gonna incorporate all 4. But for some of you, 1 or more of the techniques might be a little bit more difficult. So you're gonna determine where and how much of that technique you're going to use. So we're gonna draw 4 rectangle boxes that we're going to then practice each technique inside. So with your white color pencil, and you don't want it to be too big, I'd say like 1 inch by 2 inches or so on your black paper, and leave some space at the bottom and space in between to label your technique. So we're going to draw 4 rectangles. And I left a little bit of space at the bottom for some notes at the very end, and space between so I can label the technique. All right, so when you're done, the 4 techniques that are listed on your note sheet are the 4 techniques that we're going to label. So the same 4 techniques listed on your note sheet are the same rectangles we're practicing with. All right, so then once you're done, you're going to grab your note sheet. We're going to take notes on the first one, and then we'll do it, and then we'll take notes on the second, and then we'll go through it. All right, so fading light to dark. So your black paper is the darkest value. You're definitely going to want to be fading into the dark paper with some of the black paper showing, because then that creates the darkest end of the range of value. Plus, it's less work for you if you're only using some of your little shapes and then fading into the black paper. So the more layers, the more light, or I should say the lighter, some duplicate, the color we'll get. So with graphite on white paper, we had to layer it to build up the dark values. Well, with the black paper, we automatically have dark values, so you're going to have to layer it to build up the light values. So it's value in reverse. On black paper, the color becomes vibrant or intense or more saturated, more vibrant, like a more intense color. We're going to use a light pressure to fade into the black paper with thin layers. So we're going to underline thin layers. So Prismacolor still has some wax in it. The wax is what binds the pigment together, and then they can press it into a stick and then press it into a wood pencil casing. And so if you press really hard and you do like a couple layers of really hard pressure, it gets pretty waxy fairly quickly. But if you do thin layers, then you can like do lots of layers, you can fix mistakes, etc., etc. All right, so you need newspaper padding. And you're gonna pick a light valued color that's not white. A light valued color, a light or medium value. I'm gonna go with orange. You can go with orange if you want as well. All right, and then when we're applying graphite, what kind of motion do we use? Shout it out. Circular, okay? It's the same with Prismacolor. So I am gonna hold it in the middle, and I'm gonna try to angle it to where I'm using a little bit more of the side. And I'm gonna do a really light pressure with circular motion. So you're just watching first, and then you'll do. And by the time I get to the middle, I'm gonna start fading out. So I'm lightening up my pressure, which remember it comes from your shoulder. And the key is to get rid of the lines and have black paper show. So I do one layer, then I would turn it so my arm is comfortable, and I'm gonna build up another layer in the opposite direction and kind of fill in some of my gaps. So by the time you hit the middle, you want to already be fading out. And then I'd probably do one more layer because I want it to be a light version of orange on one side, fading into a darker version and the black paper. So as you're working, I would think about, okay, how big are some of my shapes on that tracing paper, or if you've transferred to black paper, and if this is difficult to get smooth, then you might want to have some of your shapes be a little bit smaller. So you want it to go from a light vibrant color, fading into the black paper. And this is how every single technique starts out. And it is the first layer that is the most important. If you're finished with that, you're going to take notes next to alter the value. Just to remind ourselves of the process for this one. And you'll have time to go back and fix your boxes at the end. All right, so for alter the value, we are changing the value of a color. So since there are some dark valued colors in these sets that really don't show up on black paper very well, or if you want to lighten or brighten a color, like you want to make it much more intense or look like it's glowing or something like that, we're gonna learn how to alter the value. So our first layer is gonna be white, and our second layer is gonna be a medium or dark color. So have your white ready, and then in the bottom of the tray or the top of the tray, I'm gonna put what dark color I'm going to use. So I'm gonna use like the violet. It's a little bit darker. It doesn't show up that well on black paper, but it'll show up with an underlayer of white. All right, so for alter the value on your note sheet, it says start with a thin layer of a light valued color. So we're going the lightest with white. You could do this with like peach or light pink, or there's really light oranges in there. So it just is a light base that you're then putting a medium or darker color on. So the most important part, and it's important for all of the techniques, that you want to make sure this layer is smooth. So the first layer is the most important layer. It kind of sets the tone for all your other layers going on top. Okay, then we're going to add a thin layer of a medium or dark value color. We're going to fade into the black paper. And then we'll finish with another layer of the light value color on top. So we're like sandwiching white between a color, or a color between white. Some people, they like the way like this looks with just the 2 layers, but if you want it more intense, you'll add a third, which we're going to practice with today, of white. All right. So I am going to hold this similar to how we did the graphite pencils, where you're kind of holding it horizontally. So you can use more of the edge of the Prismacolor. And again, using a circular motion. And when you get to the middle, you're going to start fading out just like you did with the first technique. And you want it to be smooth as humanly possible. So then I'm going to go back and fill in some of my gaps and get my edges really good. So I'm having good craftsmanship while I do the technique. So you want to get the white as smooth as humanly possible. And newspaper padding will help you do that. Then you're going to layer your medium or dark valued color. And actually you can scribble, like I'm going to scribble my purple off to the side just to see what it looks like without anything. So it's barely visible. It's like right there, barely visible. And so you have more variety in your color schemes. It's nice to be able to create your own values of a color, to be able to use some of those dark colors. And it's the same thing again and again. You're literally just fading into the black paper every single time. And I'm going to layer in multiple directions to make sure it's as smooth as possible before I put my third layer on top. So on your final draft, if you're like, yeah, I like that, that's fine. You can just end with a second layer. But for many of you, to create an area of emphasis, a focal point, have a certain part stand out, we're going to want a little bit more contrast. And so then that's when a third layer will help you with more contrast in color and value. So then for this practice, you are going to do a third layer of white. So again, this technique doesn't have to be white. Of course, you're going to get the most intense alteration of value with this, with the white. But I could also choose an analogous color. Like I could have chosen light pink to mix with the purple because those are analogous colors. If I was working with orange on this one, maybe I would choose a really light orange as an underlayer, or light orange with red on top, etc. So you want colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. when you're finished with altering the value, you're going to take the note under layer 2 colors that we're using analogous colors, and you're going to select 2 that are next to each other on the color wheel. So 2 colors that are next to each other. And then if you're wanting to use pink, pink fades really well into orange, purple, and red. So pink is a little bit like a neutral color in a way. I'm going to go orange and red. They're next to each other on the color wheel. I chose like a medium and a darker valued color. You could have 2 light colors, 2 medium valued colors. They just need to be next to each other on the color wheel. So let's say I wanted to use yellow. I'd either use orange or green. If I wanted to use blue, I'm either using green or violet, or another type of blue. All right. So this is exactly the same as alter the value, and it starts out the same as the first one, fading from light to dark, and you're still fading into the black paper. And I would pick the lighter of the 2 colors. So for me, the orange is lighter, so I'm going to do my first layer of orange, and I want to get it as smooth as humanly possible because the first layer is the most important layer. And so by the time I get to the middle, I'm definitely fading out. I'm going back and kind of fixing and filling in some gaps where it doesn't look smooth. And then I would layer on my darker of the 2 colors. So I'm going to layer on my red. Then if I wanted it to be like orangish red, which it will become orangish red, but if I wanted it much more orangey, I could do a 3rd layer, just like we did alter the value. So the reason why we're learning this one is, like Prismacolor comes in lots of different sizes of sets. This one has, I think, 36 in it. Yeah, 36. They come in 48, 72, all the way up to like 250 colors. Of course, like those are like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So since we only have 36 colors to choose from, and not all 36 colors are going to go in your color scheme, like most of them probably won't, then this allows you to kind of create some of your own versions of color, so more unique colors. So that you have more variety, it's more interesting to look at, etc. And so I'm going to write a little note underneath analogous colors. Start with lightest. And if they're both light or they're both medium, then it really doesn't matter. When you're done, you'll put those pencils back into your set. You'll grab your notes. We'll take the notes for that one, and then we'll do the last one. So remember, do you want to be on newspaper padding? You'll be on newspaper padding the whole time for your final draft. All right. So for layer 2 colors in your notes, we started with a thin layer of one color, meaning we didn't press very hard. We used light pressure. Then we added another thin layer of an analogous color. on top, and we fade it into the black paper. Then, like, let's say I was making my own blue-green, and I started with green, I added blue on top. If I wanted it more greenish, I could add a third layer of green on top, so it looked more greenish. But the key is thin layers so that you can build up the color. All right, let's take notes for the last one while we have a note sheet out. We are going to fade from one color into another to where it's like one color on one side, one color on another, and then they mesh or blend together in the middle. So this is the only one where the black paper wouldn't show through at the end of the technique. So we're going to start on the edge with one color and fade into the middle of your section or your shape. Then we're going to start on the opposite side. There we go. Good spell. So it's just like the first technique, except you need to fade out sooner. So we're also going to use analogous colors. So we're going to write that note next to it to remind you, in case you don't like to read the notes that we're taking. Then you have a few little notes. We're going to write fade to middle. So pick your two analogous colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I'm going to pick this like orangish red and what is this one? Mulberry? Magenta? Reddish and pinkish. Pink also fades pretty well into brown as well. Pink is like the neutral of color blending, I guess, because it goes into cool colors. It also goes into warm colors. I'll start with pink. For this one, it doesn't matter what color you start with. So circular motion. But you definitely want to start fading out almost right away. So by halfway into the shape or section, it's faded out into the black paper. And then I'm going to add another layer on the side I started on. Then on the opposite side, you're going to pick your analogous color. And you're going to overlap the two to where you can't tell where one color starts and the other one stops. So I feel like this is a good one if you have some really big shapes or sections in your final draft. All right, and then I like it to blend a little bit more, so I'm going to use my pink, my first color, and kind of blend over a little bit again. Especially in the middle where the two overlap and you're essentially making a new color in the middle. All right, and then there are your Prismacolor Techniques. At the bottom, today we're going to determine what your color scheme is going to be for your final draft. Yep. So you guys are going to write color scheme and colors below at the very bottom of your paper. And then you're going to grab your color theory book. We're going to make some decisions. Just hang out for a minute. All right. So remember, each page is a color scheme. And so your final draft does not have to be colors that would normally be associated with that subject matter or image. It's called arbitrary color, where you just use whatever colors you want. Except for this assignment, we are making sure your color looks good and you're choosing a color scheme, because these are combinations of colors that are foolproof and they look good no matter what. So let's say I do pick primary colors. That doesn't mean I can only use blue, yellow, and red. That means the bulk of my color will be blue, yellow, and red, but let's say I'm working with red, I can fade a little bit into orange, I can fade a little bit into purple. With the blues, I can fade a little bit into other blues or greens or purple. Yellow, I can fade a little bit into like a yellowy orange or a yellowy green. So you're going to be using analogous colors with the main colors of that color scheme. So then we have your secondary colors, orange, green, and violet. For tertiary, you're picking 3 for a color scheme. So if they're evenly spaced, it's more exciting to the brain, but you could pick any 3 that you want to if you're going with tertiary colors. Warm colors probably gives you the most options, because you can also use pink and brown. Then you have cool colors. So remember, you can still use, and there's a lot of blues and greens in the sets, so there's a lot of options there. If you don't like a lot of color, you could neutralize your color, but it creates more work for you because you're having to dull down or gray down every single color that you use, because there's not a ton of neutral colors in this set. Analogous, if you're like, I don't know, I would just choose analogous, because like no matter how you layer and blend them, it's still going to look good. And you would use like majority of the 3 that you pick, but you could also include a little bit with the blending and fading on opposite sides. So let's say I do pick these 3, yellow, green, green, blue, green. I could fade my yellow, green into yellow, and I could fade my blue, green into blues. So it gives you a little bit more options there. If you choose complementary colors, you're picking 1 pair or 1 set. So be blue and orange, or red and green, or yellow and violet. Or there's the tertiary sets where it's like blue, green, and red, orange. And those are those dotted arrows across from each other. You could go monochromatic, which is just different values of 1 color. But I would look at how many of that color we have. And honestly, I'd probably only choose like blue and green if you go this method, because there's not a lot of some of the other colors. Like one girl wanted to do violet. There's literally like 2. So then her artwork isn't very interesting because there's like 2 colors. And some techniques, but overall just like 2 colors. You could go split complementary, where you find a color, find its complement, and split on either side. So no matter what color scheme you choose, you are going to use analogous colors for the techniques. So right now you're going to write down the name of your color scheme off of your color theory book and what colors go in it. So let's say if I pick tertiary, then I'm going to write down what 3 colors are going to go in it. And so this is what I'm going to come around and check at the start of class tomorrow to make sure you've picked a color scheme and you're choosing colors that go in it.